I am very, very honored and pleased to have the chance to introduce our final keynote speaker of the day, His Excellency Ambassador Cornelius Alvin Smith. Allow me to say a few words of background about Ambassador Smith. Ambassador Smith served as a public school principal in the Department of Education from 1956 to 1964, and as senior revenue officer of the Customs Department from 1964 until 1967. From 1967 until 1982, he was employed as a human resource specialist with the Syntax Corporation, an international chemical and pharmaceutical manufacturing company. Later on, he served as president and CEO of Smith & Associates, a professional consulting firm from 1982 until 1992. A community and political activist, Ambassador Smith entered frontline politics in the early 70s and is the founding member of the Free National Movement. He was elected as an opposition member of the Parliament for the Marco City constituency in 1982. Ambassador Smith was re-elected to serve this constituency for four successive five-year terms, from 1982 until 2002. During his long and distinguished career, Ambassador Smith served the people of the Bahamas as the senior minister with the portfolios of Minister of Education from 1992 until 1995, Minister of Public Safety and Immigration from 1995 until 1997, Minister of Tourism from 1997 until 2000, and then Minister of Transport with the local government from 2000 until 2002. He's currently, of course, the ambassador serving here in the United States, and the lecture topic that he has chosen is the Commonwealth of the Bahamas Culture, Smart Power and Diplomacy. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in a very, very warm welcome for His Excellency Cornelius Alvin Smith. Thank you.
Would you remind me to ask my staff to send you the short version, please? Thank you so very much, and thank you for inviting me to this distinguished group. Let me first indicate that my understanding that this symposium proposes to provide an opportunity to examine and to analyze the increasing importance of soft power tools and cultural diplomacy practices, and also to offer some ideas of how the U.S., as well as the rest of the world, can use smart power strategies to more effectively tackle global risks and increase global peace and security. The end goal, then, is to inject new momentum into the debate over the role of cultural diplomacy and soft power and their potential to assist in guaranteeing national security and combating global risks. My presentation this afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, I will attempt to offer some insights from the perspective of the Bahamas approach on the role that cultural diplomacy can play as an important soft power instrument in addressing and eventually diffusing conflicts at the national, regional, and global levels. But at the outset, let us begin with having a clear definition of the term cultural diplomacy. I would like to accept the definition which is offered by the American political scientist and author Milton Cummins, in which he describes cultural diplomacy as the exchange of ideas, of information, of value system, of traditions, of beliefs, and other aspects of culture with the intention of fostering mutual understanding. Cultural diplomacy may therefore be best described as the initiation or facilitation of such exchange which aims to yielding long-term benefits, whether to promote national interests, to build relationships, to enhance socio-cultural understanding, or to promote trade and investments. Now, on a practical level, cultural diplomacy has been defined as the application and the implementation of a theory of cultural diplomacy, including all models. Some have been successful, others have been not. But many have been practiced throughout history by individuals, by community, by states, or institutional actors in order to facilitate and improve relations between different cultures. These models include, for example, cultural programs, international delegations, and sports competitions, and are viewed as uniquely able to affect intercultural and interfaith understanding and to provide reconciliation. Let us examine the role that cultural diplomacy can play in impacting the conduct of international relations as a means of settling dispute. From the onset, there has to be recognition on the part of all parties to a dispute of the distinct cultural dynamics of each other, a recognition that affords equal human rights on equal terms. It requires the study of foreign cultural dynamics in order to gain a full understanding of the traditions, the history, the language, the general way of life pertaining to the engaging parties. Author Joseph Nye, in his book Bound to Lead, The Changing Nature of American Power, recognized the concept of cultural diplomacy as soft power, which he describes as the ability to attract and to co-opt rather than using force or money as a means of persuasion. This term, soft power, is now widely used in the international affairs by analysts and statesmen and is viewed as a model for the resolution of international conflicts. Now, all of us know that the ability of power is to influence the behavior of others to get the outcomes that you want. Hard power is the art of influencing behavior through coercions by way of either threats or sanctions or inducements in terms of payments, in money or in gifts. Soft power, however, gets others to want the outcomes you want, and that is, it co-opts people rather than coerce them. It is the opposite to have hard power. Soft power can be wielded not just by states, but also by actors in international politics, such as NGOs or international institutions, and is perhaps considered the second face of power that indirectly allows you to obtain the outcome you want. Now, those who criticize the concept of soft power as being ineffective assumes that actors in international relations responds only to two types of incentive, economic incentive or force. But the concept of cultural diplomacy as a soft power tool in strengthening national security and contributing to mitigating global risk is one that my country, the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, shares, and is, in essence, has been practicing this form of diplomacy from its early history. The Commonwealth of the Bahamas is a small island developing nation of 700 islands spanning over 100,000 square miles. It lies just 90 miles south of the island of Hispaniola and just 90 miles from the state of Florida. It has a population of just over 350,000 people. But apart from boasting the third highest GDP per capita in the Americas, third only to Canada and the United States, it has a strong and unshakable history of over 293 years of parliamentary democracy. Again, third only to that of Barbados and Bermuda in this hemisphere. And in less than a week, in July the 10th, we will be celebrating 39 years as an independent sovereign nation. Now, very early on, upon gaining its independence on July 10th, 1973, from Britain, the new government was quite aware of the challenges posed by not having complete control, not only of its own internal affairs, but now the expanded to foreign affairs and matters of national security. So in recognition that it could not face these challenges alone, immediate steps were taken to address this and future concerns, the first of which was becoming a member state of the United Nations, which it did in September of 1973. And in his inaugural address to the General Assembly of the United Nations, the late Sir Lyndon Oscar Pindling, the first Prime Minister of the Bahamas, in outlining the underpinnings of the Bahamas' foreign policy, pointed out that during all the intervening years of continuous constitutionally elected authority since 1729, the Bahamas had undergone constant evolution in an entirely peaceful atmosphere and without violence. The late Prime Minister added that as a nation, the Bahamas will, in its relationship with the rest of the world, adhere to its commitment to ordered, reasoned, unemotional, and evolutionary progress dominated by the deeply held religious beliefs of its people and a commitment to the rule of law. Sir Lyndon also reaffirmed that the Commonwealth of the Bahamas subscribes to the concept of alignments of states, having in common respect for human and spiritual values in the belief in the absolutely indivisible freedom of the mind of man. Bahamas immediately gained membership in the United Nations, which was followed by membership in the CARICOM and thereafter in the Organization of American States. In fact, this year marks the 20th anniversary as a member of this very important hemispheric body. What was quite evident by the government of the day upon the attainment of independence was the need to forge relations and alliances that would seek to benefit and promote the national interests and advancement of the new nation. And in this regard, relations were established at the bilateral level immediately with the former colonial power, Great Britain, and its closest and most important ally, the United States of America. These relations were solidified with the establishment of an embassy and high commission, respectively, in 1973 in both jurisdictions, followed by a high commission in another key area, Ottawa, Canada. To date, the Bahamas has representation in the United States, in London, in Ottawa, in Beijing, in Havana, Cuba, and Port-au-Prince, Haiti. Additionally, the Bahamas also has diplomatic relations with over 40 countries in all of the identified regions of the world, namely the Caribbean, the Americas, Europe, Asia, Middle East, and Africa. And it also has honorary consuls in a number of jurisdictions to promote our country. Our economy is one that is based on tourism and financial services. Over 85% of the tourism is generated from the market of the United States, and more specifically, those states of the eastern seaboard. Bahamas also imports over 90% of its food and other commodities to sustain its population from the United States. So in recognition of its being a very small developing state and its dependency on outside partnership to sustain its level of stability, especially from an economic and security perspective, there is an acute recognition of the importance of establishing and strengthening relations with like-minded states to promote national objectives. In this regard, the government of the Bahamas continues to formulate strategies to enhance its participation in the formulation of policies on issues pertaining to political, economic, social human rights, women, gender, culture, and civil society. And it enters into alliances with nations that would translate these into positive developments in the context of achieving economic and security stability. Now, with regard to the bilateral relations with its most strategic partner, the United States of America, this relationship predates that of our independence in 1973. From the outset on, there was a recognition of the commonalities that bind these two countries. The number of Americans visiting the United States, which constitute, as I said earlier, over 85% of our overall tourism arrivals, the significant percentage of imports on basic food and commodities to meet the demands of a growing nation, the large number of Bahamian nationals residing in the United States, especially in Florida and New York, and the number of Bahamian students seeking tertiary education in the United States. In the 39 years since the formal existence of this relationship between the two countries, there has been no issue that has threatened this relationship. In fact, both countries are keenly aware of the importance of maintaining cordial relations and at the same time respecting each other's sovereignty. The two countries have entered into a number of bilateral agreements in the areas of law enforcement, aviation, tax information, education, extradition, maritime, and the Operations Bahamas American Turks and Caicos OPBAT is a model cooperation exercise between the two nations in the fight against drug trafficking in the region. Gave you that background, ladies and gentlemen. So if we accept the definition of cultural diplomacy, as the initiation or facilitation of the exchange of ideas, of values, of traditions, and other aspects of culture or identity, we can clearly see that the Commonwealth of the Bahamas had been practicing this kind of diplomacy for a very long time. For instance, as a developing tourism destination and a financial center, our political leaders are frequently accompanied on promotional tours and official visits by members of the Bahamian culture sector, whether they be our musicians, our theater performers, our athletes, or our visual artists. These representatives of the Bahamian cultural community gives flesh and blood to the words and images painted by the political directorates. So while the term cultural diplomacy is a relatively new one, the Bahamas has for decades given real effect to the term. To properly illustrate the importance of the cultural aspect to our international relations, I must stress that these cultural actors form an integral part of state visits and promotional tours, performing almost as agents of the state. It is mutually agreed that these cultural actions are performing a national service, and these participations, and those who participate, are funded by the government. This understanding is critical to understanding the history of the ties between cultural and diplomacy in the Bahamas. When one thinks of the Bahamas, the image of conquering through military might is not the first that comes to mind. And yet, the Bahamas and other nations, like ours, have national interests that are just as vital to our survival and that of our neighbors as those with armies capable of enforcing their political will. We have goals and aspirations as well. And if we cannot fuel our desire to influence the world affairs and shift global policy to our advantage through the application of military might, what are we left with? The idea of simply shutting up or putting up with whatever the world hands is really no option at all. What sovereign nation would choose to allow its interests to be determined by others and try to exercise no influence on these determinations? No, we have a choice, and the choice is to approach the world order as cultural diplomats of the first order. We've always held the view that the best way to promote our national interests is not to rely on what we do not possess, nor on co-opting the way real hard power of some Western Hemisphere neighbors do, but to employ surgically a precise use of the soft power, some might say smart power, which we possess in abundance. After all, who can resist the assault of a well-aimed comforter, a beautiful calypso, an entrancing junkanoo dance? And so for a country like ours, dealing with some of the complex issues in international relations is best accomplished in an atmosphere of shared and mutual respect and goodwill without the threat of a military might. We must use smart power, and the smartest power we possess is the ability to get our international partners into a room with us or across the table from us in order to come to some agreement. The most certain way to ensure that our partners in the global community join us at the negotiating table is first and foremost always to negotiate in good faith and live by the terms of any agreement we sign. And secondly, and here is where culture is our most potent weapon, to make certain that our global partners bear us in the best of goodwill. Let me state clearly that our national security for the Bahamas is to a large extent a matter of negotiation. Lacking a military capability of imposing our will on those around us, or even defending ourselves if our sovereignty is breached, we must continually ensure our national security by negotiating treaties and agreements with those with whom we share this hemisphere or this region and the resources therein. It may be an oversimplification, but we take it that the first step in negotiation is really getting the other side to the table. And that is why our ability to engender the trust and goodwill of the world in which we live is so important. I will share with you now some of the tools we use to further strengthen the ties that bind us to the global community. The Bahamas has a very rich and vibrant cultural life, and we have sought and defined a number of ways to share this culture at the world stage. As a premier beach destination, we have always been known for our unparalleled sun and sand and sea. But in this day, when Dubai and Japan are manufacturing sun and sand and sea destinations, we had to broaden our scope in order to ensure that our voice remains a number one of a highly unique and a very shareable experience. In this world where it's possible to live in D.C. and eat authentic food from around the world, a nation's culinary identity is an important component in our discussions. And so some years ago, we started the Bahamas International Seafood Festival, an event marketed to tourists and food and travel writers to expose them to our local traditions with subtle movements like the founding of the festival and the choice to sponsor teams to the culinary Olympics. We believe that the Bahamas has carved out a place at the table, so to speak, next to the world's other culinary powerhouses, but ours is a distinct and a pronounced flavor. Speaking of competition, over the last few decades, Bahamian athletes have continued to excel in regional and international sporting competitions, such as Carifta Games, the Commonwealth Games, and the most prestigious of them all, the Olympics, the latter of which the Bahamas has won more gold medals per capita than any other competing country. Bahamian athletes have also excelled in professional sports in the United States, such as the major leagues of baseball and the National Basketball Association. and the Bahamas government contributes in ways to develop and enhance our product in this way. Now, a cynical and short-sighted examination of the way we in the Bahamas practice cultural interaction would conclude that we are simply assuring ourselves of a steady stream of consumers for our tourism product. But the truth is deeper, more complicated than that. I've said on a number of times, we are a small and open and vulnerable economy, and to protect ourselves from unnecessary and unwanted incursion, we must constantly find new ways to protect and to project our desires onto the world. As I said before, the Bahamas has a strong cultural heritage that dates back to our ancestors from the continent of Africa. These include our Junkanoo Festival that is held on Boxing Day, our traditional and strong religious services, our matches, our bands, represented fraternities and lodges, our youth groups and civil society, and in exposing them to the international community and other entities to this rich diversity, we are of the view that we are making and will continue to be making a contribution towards regional, hemispheric, and multilateral efforts. Through its Ministry of Culture, the government has embarked on important programs and initiatives to seek to promote Bahamian culture at the national, regional, and global levels. We have what we call a Young Junkanoo program, which seeks to mold future Junkanooers to one day compete at the adult level in the national festival that is the hallmark of Bahamas cultural diplomacy. Ladies and gentlemen, for the Bahamas, cultural diplomacy is not secondary to political or economic diplomacy, but rather it functions as a necessary component thereof. Let me thank you for your attention, and Mr. Coordinator, I wish to thank you for affording me this opportunity to make a contribution to this most important issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, and it's great to see the strong interest in cultural diplomacy also from the Bahamas. It's very, very refreshing to hear your remarks. Who would like to pose a question or make a comment? This is your chance. As always, if you could briefly introduce yourself then when you begin. Who would like to go first? Comments or questions? Yeah, we'll start over on this side. Okay, please.
I just want to fill the void, and so I happened to have the opportunity to visit Bahamas by taking a cruise, and I enjoyed it. I did not go to the beach because I'm not a beach person, but whatever I saw there was very interesting, and I encourage you, whenever you have some extra dollar to spend some places, go to Bahamas.
Thank you very much.
I think we could invite you to join our tourism promoters. Thank you very much for visiting our country. I'm very pleased that you have enjoyed it, but also let me take the opportunity to say we are one of your nearest offshore neighbors. We are only, you can get on a plane at Reagan International at 8 o'clock in the morning. You'll be on a beach at 11:30 that day. I leave here in the morning. I go and have a lunch in the Bahamas, meet with my prime minister or whatever, and I catch a 3 o'clock flight and come back. We are very near and very inexpensive to get there. And the summer is now, travel time is now, think about the Bahamas. Thank you very much.
Okay, maybe one other question before we transition to the panel discussion. Are there any examples of regional cultural diplomacy in the Caribbean, or is it still primarily unilateral from the different countries?
Oh, no. Through CARICOM, we began to look at this whole diplomacy in the context of the CARICOM region, all of the English-speaking countries of the Caribbean, but very recently we've added both Haiti and the Dominican Republic. So No, we're beginning to look at it on a regional basis.
Do you have any examples of, let's say, a cultural diplomacy activity that took place at the regional level, or?
Well, we have right now we have what is called Caribbean Month in the United States, and so we are exposing our music, our dance, our artists throughout the United States, whether in Florida, in Washington, or in New York, and that's being done on a regional basis.
Excellent. Any other final questions before we transition to the panel discussion? Okay, in that case, then, if we could please express our sincere gratitude to His Excellency Ambassador Smith. Thank you.
Good.